information that was received through one of the witnesses that have approached me at Americans for Safe Aerospace.
Was this documented in any official form, whether it was a police blotter?
Yes, they had official documentation and records from the event that the witness held over the years.
And I'm not going to ask you to do it right now for time reasons, but you'd be able to sketch what was witnessed, correct? And have you seen that before on any other equipment and/or during your flight time?
I have not seen what they've described. This object was estimated to be almost the size of a football field, and I have not seen anything personally that large.
Okay, and then another question on follow-up referencing the gimbal video Go Fast incident. Can you just clarify, because to our understanding, the footage was actually cut off at a certain point, but what happens at the end of that video, just for those Americans specifically that are wanting to know about the rest of that footage?
Certainly. There was some uncertainty or instability with the object. It seemed to rock a bit, and that's the last I had seen of the video. Much of the data that I would recommend be analyzed would consist of radar data that would provide precise kinematics on the object, as well as the fleet of objects that were operating nearby.
Okay, and follow-up, in regards to the reporting procedures that Mr. Garcia had addressed on, as well as Representative Burchett, with the FAA, to your understanding, pilots that are seeing this, commercial airline pilots, are they receiving cease and desist letters from corporations for coming forward with information in regards to safety for potential airline passengers?
I have been made privy to conversations with commercial aviators who have received cease and desist orders.
So the American public should know that corporations are putting their own reputations on the not the line, but ahead of the safety of the American people. And I think, would you agree with that statement?
It appears so.
Okay. And I guess this would be my last, I'm out of time. I yield. I'll be back.
Good. Mr. Moskowitz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, let's talk about the laws of physics for a second. Mr. Graves and Commander Favor, I heard you talk about speed. When those objects broke the sound barrier, did they make a sonic boom?
I was in a jet. You can't hear anything. It's kind of loud in there.
Yeah, you're not able to actually personally tell within the vehicle. I will say the objects that we were seeing, they were spherical, and they were observed up to Mach 2, which is a very non-aerodynamic shape.
What about G-forces? Let's talk about G-forces of those vehicles. Could a human survive those G-forces with known technology today?
No.
No, not for the acceleration rates that we observed.
Okay. What about what they look like? How close did you get? Did you see a seam or a rivet or a section? And what I mean is, obviously, the jets you're flying have all those things. Did these objects have those?
Do you want to go, Ryan?
I didn't have the detail to be able to tell that.
So we got within a half mile of Tic Tac, which people say that's pretty far, but in airplanes, that's actually relatively close. No, it was perfectly white, smooth, no windows, although when we did take the original FLIR video that is out there, when you put it on a big screen, it actually had two little objects that came out of the bottom of it. But other than that, no windows, no seams, no nothing.
Mr. Grush, as a result of your previous government work, have you met with people with direct knowledge or have direct knowledge yourself of non-human origin craft?
Yes, I personally interviewed those individuals.
Mr. Grush, as a result of your previous government work, have you met with people with direct knowledge or have direct knowledge yourself about ATs, advanced technologies that the U.S. government has?
Based on conventional advanced tech, I was briefed to the preponderance of the Defense Department's both space and aerospace compartmented programs, yeah.
Do you have knowledge or do you have reason to believe that there are programs in the advanced tech space that are unsanctioned?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when you say that they're above congressional oversight, what do you mean?
Complicated question. So there's, some, I would call it abuse here. So congressional oversight of conventional special access programs, so I'll use Title 10, so DOD as an example, right? So 10 U.S. Code Section 119 discusses congressional oversight of SAPs, discusses the DepSecDef's ability to waive congressional reporting. However, the Gang of Eight is at least supposed to be notified if a waived or waive-bigoted unacknowledged SAP is created, and that's public law.
Well, so that how does, I don't want to cut you off, but
Yeah.
how does a program like that get funded?
I will give you generalities. I can get very specific in a closed session, but misappropriation of funds and
Does that mean
self-fund.
that there is money in the budget that is said to go to a program, but it doesn't, and it goes to something else?
Yes, I have specific knowledge of that. Yep.
Do you think U.S. corporations are overcharging for certain tech they're selling to the U.S. government, and that additional money is going to programs?
Correct, through something called IRAD.
Okay. Satellite imagery. Let's talk about satellite imagery. We have satellites all over the place, some that we're aware of and many that we're not aware of, right? We're taking pictures of everything at every point and second. Mr. Grush, are you aware, do you have direct knowledge, or have you talked to people with direct knowledge that there are satellite imagery of these events?
That was one of my primary tasks at NGA, since we process, exploit, and disseminate that kind of information. I've seen multiple cases, some of which, to my understanding, and of course, I left NGA in April, so that's my information cutoff date. But I personally reviewed both what we call overhead collection and from other strategic and tactical platforms that I could not even explain prosaically. And I have a degree in physics, by the way, as well. And I am aware that you guys have not seen these reports, unfortunately. And I don't know why.
Do you have direct knowledge, or you had spoken to people with direct knowledge that this imagery applies to crash sites, crash imagery?
I can't discuss that in an open session.
Okay. Do you have any information that the U.S. government is involved in a disinformation campaign to deny the existence of certain UAPs?
I can't go beyond what I've already stated publicly in my News Nation interview because it touches other sensitivities.
Okay. I'll yield the balance of my time back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Fox?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank our witnesses for being here today. Mr. Garouche, in your sworn testimony, you state that the United States government has retrieved supposedly extraterrestrial spacecraft and other UAP-related artifacts. You go so far as to state that the U.S. is in possession of, quote, non-human spacecraft, end quote, and that some of these artifacts have circulated with defense contractors. Several other former military and intelligence officials have come forward with similar allegations, albeit in non-public settings. However, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, the director of AARO, previously testified before Congress that there has been, and I quote, no credible evidence thus far of extraterrestrial activity or of, quote, off-world technology brought to the attention of the office. To your knowledge, is that statement correct?
It's not accurate. I believe Dr. Kirkpatrick mentioned he had about 30 individuals that have come to Aero thus far. A few of those individuals have also come to Aero that I also interviewed.
Okay.
And I know what they provided Dr. Kirkpatrick and their team.
Okay,
I was able to evaluate
okay.
that information.
I need to go on.
Sure.
But my understanding that his statement is accurate, came from a direct quote. And this contradiction is a perfect example of why we need to inject transparency into our government. And for another example, look no further than the pitiful response to the Chinese spy balloon debacle earlier this year. You may remember the mass confusion that ensued when the balloon was first spotted over Montana, 4 days after it first entered U.S. airspace over Alaska. The Biden administration's initial inability to address the object grew into a continuous series of embarrassments. After news of the balloon reached the mainstream media, we were assured that the balloon posed no threat to our security. However, after the balloon was allowed to transit the entire continental United States, fighter jets were scrambled off the coast of South Carolina to shoot it down. This flip-flopping and obfuscation caused needless confusion, fear, and panic across the country. It's my hope, Mr. Chairman, that this sort of confusion will not be repeated. We should investigate the extent to which elements of our government possess or do not possess information that is of critical value to the American people. We owe it to the citizens of this nation to make sure that our government is transparent and accountable. We must make sure that our government provides answers, and Congress must do its duty to solicit those answers. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Yeah, Mr. Frost.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In 2022, NASA announced that it was commissioning an independent study team to examine UAPs. The NASA team is comprised of scientists across different fields, as well as former astronauts and pilots. In May, the independent study team held its first public meeting, which included the perspectives from NASA senior leaders, as well as perspectives from the Department of Defense and intelligence agencies. The NASA study team is also expected to release its first report pretty soon, and I think it's safe to say that we all eagerly await its results. Mr. Graves, how might NASA's research influence the commercial industry regarding safety in UAP?
I think NASA has a big role to play as far as commercial aviation safety, and it's one of their original charges as an organization. One of the recommendations that have been put forward is to utilize their existing aviation safety reporting system to serve as a short-term fill and trusted platform for pilots that want to report on UAP. It also has built-in analytics capability and is funded by Congress.
Gotcha. And also, Mr. Graves, are there any other industries that may be influenced by the NASA research on UAPs? And if so, how so?
Well, I think there is a large swath of commercial capabilities that could be brought to bear on this topic, from space-based or ground-based sensor systems that are available open source or through commercial marketplaces. And I think NASA's work, as they work to identify and highlight specific parameters that can be found, we can take that information and promulgate this through the public sector so that we can have a more open conversation about what we're seeing.
You know, in 2020, the Department of Defense released several videos of UAPs, including Mr. Freyer's experience, U.S. Navy pilots that recorded footage. In 2021, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence released a preliminary report on UAP events. NASA Administrator Bill Nelson stated that NASA would begin to investigate these events. In fact, I sit on Science, Space, and Technology Committee, and when we were doing a hearing with the NASA Administrator Bill Nelson, I asked, you know, why NASA needed to be fully funded, and there were many great reasons, but one of them was actually had to do with UAPs. He actually mentioned, you know, is there life out there? I don't know. And so either way, these actions ultimately led NASA to assemble the independent study team that I mentioned earlier. Also in 2021, Harvard University stood up the Galileo project to research and examine the origins of UAP. So it seems like both, you know, from NASA and in the higher education community, because of the work that y'all have done and people standing up, you know, I think we're seeing some of that stigma slowly going away. Mr. Freyer, do you believe that military pilots feeling empowered to share their UAP experiences has directly impacted the scientific community's research goals on this topic?
I would say yes. I would say that, you know, starting in 2017, when it actually came out, it took that stigma away. I mean, I've talked to multiple senators who said prior to that, if you'd have mentioned UAP, you'd have been laughed off the hill. And now we're sitting here today for a public testimony on what's actually going on. You know, I'm hoping that this curve will be more of an exponential and we'll get more and more transparent to the level that we can.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, it's important. I couldn't imagine, you know, I'm not a pilot, but I used to fly gliders in Civil Air Patrol. Huh? Yeah,
Pilot?
I mean, you know. And so either way, I mean, I couldn't imagine, you know, being in the glider and seeing something and then not feeling like I had the agency to talk about it. Mr. Graves, can you discuss the importance of seeking scientists to sit on your advisory board?
Absolutely. I think ultimately this is going to be a scientific problem. And not only that, it's also an engineering problem. I've been working with the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics to help them stand up a UAP integration committee to help integrate their engineering prowess into this problem. And so, yes, very much, I think this is an engineering and scientific problem as much as a national security problem.
And how might Congress help to facilitate partnerships between the scientific community and the UAP focus groups within government?
Well, I think one of the things they can do is to have these types of hearings to communicate to the public that this is a topic of interest. I think that there is a pseudo market, if you will, of interested capabilities and talent that want to approach this topic. And we're seeing that start to grow now. So I think continued conversation, reduction of stigma is going to allow that to flourish and allow answers to help generate themselves.
100%. Well, thank you all for being here, and thank you for your work. I think it's important that we keep our top scientific minds focused on this issue and look for ways to increase collaboration. Thank you so much. I yield back.
Mr. Comer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me say I want to thank you for having this hearing, and I want to thank Mr. Burchett, Ms. Luna for leading this hearing. And with that, I yield my 5 minutes to Mr. Burchett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to direct this, I believe, to Mr. Grush, but if any of you all feel like you need to jump in, just jump right in. We're good. Has the U.S. government become aware of actual evidence of extraterrestrial, otherwise unexplained forms of intelligence? And if so, when do you think this first occurred?
I like to use the term non-human. I don't like to denote origin. Keeps the aperture open, both scientifically. Certainly, like I've discussed publicly previously, 1930s.
Okay. Can you give me the names and titles of the people with direct firsthand knowledge and access to some of this crash retrieval, some of these crash retrieval programs, and maybe which facilities, military bases that the recovered material would be in? And I know a lot of Congress talked about we're going to go to Area 51, and and there's nothing there anymore anyway. It's just and we move like a glacier. And as soon as we announce it, I'm sure the moving vans would pull up. But please.
I can't discuss that publicly, but I did provide that information both to the Intel committees and the Inspector General.
And we could get that in the SCIF if we were allowed to get in a SCIF with you. Would that be probably what you would think?
Sure, if you had the appropriate accesses, yeah.
What special access programs cover this information, and how is it possible that they have evaded oversight for so long?
I do know the names. Once again, I can't discuss that publicly and how they've evaded oversight. In a closed setting, I could tell you the specific tradecraft used.
All right. When do you think those programs began, and who authorized them?
I do know a lot of that information, but that's something I can't discuss publicly because of sensitivities.
All right. If any of y'all want to jump in on any of this, you're more than welcome to. What level of security clearance is required to fully access these programs?
Well, anybody who has...
And I say that because myself, Representative Gates and Representative Luna were basically turned away at one point at Eglin. So please go right ahead.
Certainly difference between member access and say somebody like me, but anybody who has a TSSCI clearance and meets the eligibility criteria, the access adjudicative authority should be able to grant you access.
Mr. Burchett, if you'll yield, so just to put a fine point on that, there's nothing that you're aware of that's above special access program classification.
It's a misnomer that there's anything actually above top secret. Executive Order 13526 delineates the classification levels.
Right, but I draw a point on that because we can have access to those programs, and so the notion that we're not being given that access sort of defies our typical muscle memory here in Congress. Thank you, Mr. Burchett. I'll yield back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Gates. Along those lines, Title 10, you may not know this or not, but Title 10 and Title 50 authorization, they seem to say they're inefficient.
With Self, you can see your credit change. And the Self Visa credit card can be your next tool for building it. With Self, there is no hard pull or inquiries on your credit. Keep an eye on your spending activity, and remember to always pay at least the minimum balance on time. You don't need to put any additional money up front. Your Credit Builder account secures your Self credit card. Accounts in good standing can have the opportunity to increase their credit limit in time. And the best part? Your Self card can be used everywhere Visa cards are accepted in the U.S. Eligible customers with a Credit Builder account can order the Self card today. Join a 1 million building credit and savings.
Hi, excuse me, miss, hello. What if I told you I could get you some money right now?
I wouldn't believe you.
Okay, let's get out your phone, download the app called Bridget. All right, they're gonna give you up to $250 in under 2 minutes with no credit check or interest.
Oh my gosh, I got it. Hi, my name's Cassandra and Bridget just showed me the money.
And if so, why?
I can't go beyond what I've already espoused publicly about that.
Okay, I've been told to ask you what that is and how to get it in the record.
Which
What have you stated publicly in your interviews for the congressional record?
if you reference my News Nation interview and I talk about a multi-decade, campaign to disenfranchise public interest,
Sorry, Mr.
basically.
Chairman, I've gone.
Yeah.
Thank
I
you.
apologize, Mr. Chairman. I yield back negative 21 seconds.
Thank you. Ms. Ocasio-Cortez?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for coming here today. I do concur with the ranking member as well as several other members here on this committee that this is a committee for whistleblowers and for the protection of whistleblowers as well. So we understand what you're putting on the table here and what you're putting on the line here, and we thank you for that. Mr. Grush, you sat on the Unidentified Anomalous Phenomenon Task Force created in the 2020 NDAA, correct?
Yes.
There have been some things that have been mentioned here during this hearing that I wanted to pick up on. Mr. Graves, you mentioned specifically during the answers to one of your questions, you named Boeing contractors being engaged in an incident regarding this red cube about a football field wide. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about the interaction, or Mr. Grush, either of you, the interactions between defense contractor companies and any UAP-related programs or activities.
So I'll just say that the information about the contractor himself were provided by a witness, and I have no particular detail in that relationship.
Mr. Grush?
The kind of general unclassed wave tops, certainly the contractors, are the metal benders, so to speak. They're the ones actually doing specific performance on government contracts.
Are they required to issue any disclosure regarding UAP sightings, or do they engage in any reporting around this?
In terms of the contractors,
Yes.
not that I'm aware of.
They do not. Okay. Now, when it comes to notification that you had mentioned about IRAD programs, we have seen defense contractors abuse their contracts before through this committee. I have seen it personally, and I have also seen the notification requirements to Congress abused. I am wondering, one of the loopholes that we see in the law is that there is, at least from my vantage point, is that depending on what we're seeing, is that there are no actual definitions or requirements for notification. What methods of notification did you observe? Like when they say they notified Congress, how did they do that? Do you have insight into that?
For certain IRAD activities, I can only think of ones conventional in nature. Sometimes they flow through certain, I'll just say, SAP programs that have cognizant authority over the Air Force or something, and those are congressionally reported compartments, but IRAD is literally internal to the contractor, so as long as it's money, either profits, private investment, et cetera, they can do whatever they want.
To put a finer point on it, when there is a requirement for any agency or company to notify, or any agency to notify Congress, do they contact the chairman of a committee? Do they get them on the phone specifically? Is this through an email to hypothetically a dead email box?
A lot of it comes through what they call the PPR, Periodic Program Review Process. If it's a SAP or Controlled Access Program Equity, and then those go to the specific committees, whether it be the SAS, CASC, HISI.
Thank you. I apologize. My time is limited. Mr. Graves, one of your main concerns is that the FAA currently does not have an official process to receive reports of UAP from pilots or others, correct?
Correct.
And in your experience, what data should the AERO program prioritize for potential collection? We have, location, date, time, but are there other specific characteristics that should be included in these reports?
Certainly. I think that there's two categories that would be important. One would be kinematics and understanding the specifics of how the vehicle or objects are moving. And the second would be a more zoomed out approach of being able to look at origin and destination before the incident, as well as getting a better contextual understanding of how these objects are interacting with each other.
Thank you. Now, because I only have a minute left, I apologize, we only have 5 minutes today, but for the record, if you or me where would you look? Titles, programs, departments, regions, if you could just name anything. And I put that as an open question to the three of you.
I'd be happy to give you that in a closed environment. I can tell you specifically.
Thank you. Commander Fravor?
And I would say, and I've told people that you have to know where to look. They're not going to divulge it to you because of the classification levels. But if you know where to look and who to talk to, which is exactly what Mr. Grush can point you, then you have them.
Okay. Mr. Graves?
I was an operator, so I was depending on folks like Mr. Grosh to do that homework.
Okay. Thank you very much. I yield back to the chair.
Mr. Biggs?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I thank the witnesses for being here today. I'm over here. Thank you so much for being here. I want to get into specifics here, and the reason I'm going to go this way is because you've talked a bit about what I would call misdirection by official U.S. government with regard to UAPs, right? And so I'm going to get to that in a second. But last week, White House NSC spokesman John Kirby stated that UAPs are having an impact on our training ranges and need to be treated as a legitimate issue. Do you concur with the statements? That's for each of you.
Yes.
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 Okay. Now, having said that, I'm going to take you to specific instances around the Phoenix Valley, because that's where I live. And in '97, we had the famous Phoenix Light case. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that. There were two things that went along with that, and the explanation was military training range off Luke and the Barry Goldwater Range. Do you know anything different other than the official explanation of those lights?
Only what's in the public vernacular about it. That was outside the scope of my duties.
And if we wanted to, just my question along with my colleague from New York, Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, if we wanted to find out more about that, where would we go to find the files, and who would we address? And are you going to tell me we need to go to a SCIF so you can tell us in a SCIF?
I could potentially give you a vector on that. That specific case, I'm not, in terms of public, but I give you a vector in a closed environment, yeah.
That would be good, thank you. So if it's true that UAPs are having an impact on training ranges, and this administration considers it to be a legitimate issue, what steps can Congress take to address training range impacts? And I say that having two very large training ranges in my state. And so we'll start with Mr. Graves and going down the panel.
Some of the initial procedures have been implemented, such as within the United States Navy, that have a range failure report that gathers information from pilots. I understand that a service-wide reporting mechanism is still pending. However, that would be a great next step, not only for gathering information, but for showing the troops that it is an acceptable topic and reducing the stigma.
Okay, please, all of you continue.
Yeah, as a recipient of a lot of those training range reports, sometimes we only get contextual kind of oral reporting. It'd be nice if they attached all sensor data and there's a system in place that can handle multiple classifications of data. And that's an issue with the F-35, right? That jet was never built to be an ISR platform. And it's a pain in the, we'll just say butt, to get that data off, so, yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I would agree with the previous two, being a user of those training ranges, that the data has to be out there. You have to acknowledge that you're seeing them, and then you have to collect the data. Right now, you get the report, someone says, I saw something, but no one collects the radar data to back it up and do research.
Okay. Do you believe that the 2019 classification guidelines for UAPs interferes with the federal government's ability to be transparent with the American people? And do you think we need to be more transparent with the American people? All of you, yeah.
I'll say yes to that.
Yeah, I'm familiar with at least the UAP Task Force 2019 Security Classification Guide. I think it's fair. I did actually help author that with the director
you got a bias that way then.
But I will say, I'll call it a lazy attitude about declassifying videos. I mean, I've seen some of the videos of the recent shoot down, and I saw no reason that couldn't have been released as long as they mask some data. The American people deserve to see that imagery and full motion video.
I would think, well, in my opinion, I will say things are overclassified. I know for a fact the video or the pictures that came out in the I think it was 2020 report that had the stuff off the East Coast, they were taken with an iPhone off the East Coast. A buddy of mine was one of the senior people there, and he said they were originally classified as TSSCI. And my question to him was, what's TSSCI about these? They're an iPhone
Right.
literally off the vacapes. That's not TSSCI. So they're overclassified, and as soon as they do that, they go in a vault, and then you all have to look for them.
Yeah, so with the overclassification, that may be one way. Are there other ways that the DOD or intelligence agencies are keeping this information from the American people or even from Congress?
I think part of that has been not encouraging reporting. If the problem is not something that can be measured, it's not something that's going to be fixed.
Okay, very good. Well, I'm out of time, and I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
First of all, without objection, Representative Nick Langworthy of New York has waived on the subcommittee for purpose of questioning witnesses at today's subcommittee hearing. And then we go to Mr. Burleson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate you guys coming out today, testifying. Look, I've been here for 6 months, and I'm pretty skeptical. I don't trust anything in this town. And so I think that's because I'm from Missouri. You've got to show me, right? With that being said, there's been a lot of things that have been said in the public, Mr. Grush, and so I want to get down to, if we can, some specifics, right? So at one point you had said that there has been harmful activity or aggressive activity. Has any of the activity been aggressive, been hostile in your reports?
I know of multiple colleagues of mine that got physically injured. And the activity, and I got to...
By UAPs or by people within the federal government?
Both.
Okay, so there has been activity by